Hi guys, welcome to the rundown. My name is Mikhala Barasa.
And I'm Ndanu Nzyuko.
And today we are having a conversation about economic policy and the law. And we need to determine the relationship between the economic policies in Kenya today and the law. Now, before we do that, 61 of you have already subscribed to our channel as of today. So if you've not subscribed, please finger to it, just down here, under here. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as we go into this episode, maybe Ndanu can start us off because I feel like we need to understand the reasoning behind why we chose this particular topic for this episode. So Ndanu, take it away.
So the reason why we selected this topic is because of the various interactions between politics, the judicial system, or the legal framework in the country, and governance. Okay, so the last few months, there's been a lot of issues around the housing levy. Okay.
Yeah.
So which has even prompted the government to take a bill to Parliament to have the housing levy formalized legally. Okay. So you had some time back the president saying, "Oh, the judiciary is trying to sabotage him," and he had some specific economic policies that he wanted to put in place to empower the Kenyan population economically. And one of the things was affordable housing. Okay. So this was the housing levy that a lot of salaried people were being deducted was termed unconstitutional at some point. Okay. And even some employers refunded their staff some of the money that had been deducted.
Were you refunded?
I'll check.
We have not yet been refunded. Okay.
Ifikie HR wa Mikhala.
I love my job very much, but I think we will be refunded.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, so then this whole conversation started. Okay, so we were wondering. Okay, so then how do the economic policies and the law interact? Okay, so for example, our current government during the campaign period, they had a manifesto. So the manifesto is basically a list or a document that outlines the various hopes and dreams that the aspirants have for the country. Okay, this include policies that they will implement, how they will be able to drive economic growth, how they will improve the livelihood of Kenyans, the maybe issues to do with health, the social impact, things like that. Okay, so now to end of 2023 to 2024, the president says that the judiciary is trying to sabotage him when the housing levy was termed unconstitutional. So then that is what made us think, okay, so what does the housing levy have to do with the law? Yes. And that basically is the background for this episode, okay? So we'd like to understand the economic policies that the government wants to implement, what legal framework should be in place for them to be able to implement these policies. Yeah, so that's it. So I think before I hand it over to Mikhala, I can start by explaining what is an economic policy.
Yeah.
So an economic policy is basically policies that the government in power usually puts in place to drive economic growth and development. Okay, so basically the government tries to streamline economic growth. So there are different types of economies. So there's an open economy where the government, there's very little intervention or no intervention from the government. The government allows market forces to work.
To compete, and then all of you will find your footing somewhere at some time.
Yeah, so a lot of the capitalist economies have that sort of background to it where, supply and demand drives the economy, okay? So start a business, if you have demand, then you can supply products and things like that. Even for exports, imports, they allow the market forces to drive the economy. But you find that in such a situation, it might not be very effective because there are many things that come into play with an economy. So a lot of governments have take an approach of sort of a mixed type of economy where the government intervenes and puts in place certain policies that will be able to drive economic growth. So, for example, when there is limited money supply in the economy, you may find the government can increase its spending so that businesses can be able to get more money. Okay, so they'll give out more contracts and more tenders to business people so that there is a lot more
money in circulation.
Yes, in the economy. Yeah. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what economic policies are.
Okay. So having understood what economic policies are, my point of departure as a lawyer was to try and define what a policy is and what the law is. And my reason for this definition is because it's going to inform a lot of how this discussion is going to go for me. So I looked at the Black's Law Dictionary definition of a policy. So a policy means the general principle by which a government is guided in its management of public affairs. Emphasis on general principles. The law, on the other hand, the Black's Law Dictionary defines it as that which is laid down and is established, and citizens are subject to it, failure to which it causes either a sanction or a legal consequence. Now, for me, my point of departure was a policy is very idealistic. It is, especially if it's in a manifesto, this is what I want. It's like me saying, I want that pair of shoes. Versus me saying, I have bought this pair of shoes, this is how I take care of it. So if there is a policy, it has to follow the law. Because a policy is very idealistic. I can get in government and change the policy, but I cannot get in government and change the law. Now, let's take it back and look at it from the perspective of simple. Let's leave economic policy. Let's go back to employment policy. We have an employment policy. You go to court and tell them, oh, by the way, instead of 21 leave days, I'm giving my people 7 leave days. Will the law allow you to effect that policy? The law will not allow you to effect that policy. Why? Because it's in contravention with the law. And this goes the same way for economic policies. So my first point of departure is even from the definition. If you flout a law, if your policy flouts the law, then there'll be a consequence. If your policy follows the law, then it's easier to implement. And maybe as we even talk about this, the issues that came out clearly for me in that judgment, when you listen to the judgment of Meoli and Honorable Majanja, you'll hear them talk a lot about good governance and public participation. And public participation has been a conversation that has been ongoing in a lot of judicial decisions and judicial conversations. Now, one of the things that the court was telling them was asking is, did you guys do proper public participation? And what is it about this bill or this law or this policy that shows the fullness of the public participation vis-a-vis the tenets of good governance? So I feel like when you're drafting an economic policy, for starters, it has to be within the law. There has to be some sort of transparency. But also, you have to look at it holistically. How is this thing affecting the public? Because when you look at this one, and my thoughts are a bit all over the place with this, when you look at it, there is the issue of evictions. People are getting evicted. But then, isn't this eviction kind of like infringing on my right to housing already and my right to human dignity? So is this eviction within the law? Are we given proper notice for this eviction to happen? Are we given alternative settlement areas? You know, there's pockets of rights here and there. And you know, in such instances, like we were saying in our previous episodes, what happens in times of war and conflict, who are the most affected? Women and children. So women are remaining homeless, children are remaining homeless. To do what? You're throwing me out of a house to build for me a house. Make it make sense. I know which direction you're going with, but before I come back and discuss public participation in kind of in detail, maybe you can tell me the direction you're leaning with it.
Okay, so first of all, I agree with you and your definitions of policy and the law, because when you look at how a lot of the international organizations have defined public policy, it's basically a set of the legal framework, the laws, the regulations that a government has put in place to govern like basically how the country and the economy is going to run. Okay. So public policy includes legal framework. Okay. So public policy and legal framework go hand in hand.
Yes.
Okay. So that's where you'll find, for example, for there to be enforcement of certain statutory deductions, there has to be a law in
Yes,
place.
exactly.
Okay. So for example, I think one of the reasons why like the housing levy could not be properly effected is what legal framework was it standing on?
Yes.
Yes. What act of parliament has legalized that? Okay. So you can say maybe in the constitution, you can say the constitution of Kenya gives people the right to housing. Okay. So yes, there's a right to housing, but how is that going to be administered? That's why besides the constitution, now there are other laws and other acts of parliament that come into place. Okay. So that act of parliament then gives a definition or a legal framework as to how this, for example, affordable housing is going to be implemented. Okay. So, and you see that's where the current government now failed. Okay. They were here saying, oh, we want to give you affordable housing. But what's the legal framework behind it? Okay. For example, right now, as they're trying to implement the new NHIF, the SHIF, yes. So they had to go to parliament to go and repeal the NHIF laws and regulations so that now they can come and implement the SHIF ones. Okay. So you can't just say, oh, okay, you wake up as the executive and say, oh, today, now I've decided I am going to give the people of Kakamega free money, you know.
Hey, please give us. Continue, sorry.
So what legal framework is that going to stand on? Okay. Yeah. So public policy has to be guided by a legal framework. Yes. And regulations that have been passed by the government through parliament and other bodies, yes, that have been, created by an act of parliament. Yeah. So, because I think also one of the biggest questions and that people were having is, for example, as we're being deducted the housing levy, who is collecting
Who is collecting it? And that was a big part of that judgment.
Yes.
And I like the fact that you raised what is the legal framework behind this? Because to me, most of these things look like they were rushed.
Exactly.
And when you listen to that judgment by Majanja, it's a very interesting, it's like 1 hour and 10 minutes, but you need to actually listen to that judgment and hear their reasoning around it. And they're saying the same things you're saying. Yes, the housing levy is here.
Yes.
How are we collecting it? And what is the accountability structure?
Yes.
How is it going to be disseminated? Yes, we can collect it based on Act A, B, C, D, E, whatever you've amended and whatnot, but where is this money going?
Exactly.
Secondly, why is KRA the body that is mandated to collect this housing levy? Because it's not, in itself, it's not a tax.
It's not a tax.
You're calling it a levy.
Exactly.
Is KRA then mandated to collect this kind of levy? If it's not, then where should it be collected? Is it probably, does the Ministry of Housing probably have to come up with some sort of fund or something where this money is supposed to go? And they're saying, no, we're collecting it and then we'll put it in a separate fund. Judiciary was like, no, this is not KRA's job.
Yeah.
Why? Because when you are thinking about this policy, you did not think about it in tandem with the law. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that. I think in addition to that, when a government is trying to implement various policies, what we're basically saying is you have to follow a legal framework in place. Okay. Also, I think one of the other importance of legal framework and regulations is because it gives you a full guidance on how will you implement this thing step by step. Okay. So for example, if it's the housing levy that we've been talking about, is it going to be collected by housing finance? Okay. And if it's collected by housing finance, how are they going to build these houses? Where this house is going to be built? What are the standards around the houses? How much can the government spend on building the houses? Because, a lot of the times when we don't have a clear structure of how money that is being collected from the public is going to be dispensed, that's where you have, for example, a new government body is created. Half of the money is spent on salaries, and then the other half is what is going to be used on the development projects.
And they will not be complete.
Exactly.
And they will not be complete project. Have you had the numbers for SHIF, Social Insurance Fund? If you've watched enough TV, they are talking about such big sums of money.
Yes.
And in your head, you're thinking, where? All that money is going to come from my salary.
Imagine.
Fine. And then, see, with this amount of money, there's still no proper accountability structure.
Exactly.
You're just going to court and you have the audacity to just say, you know what, KRA will collect the money and then we'll put it in a certain fund and then because one of the tenets of good governance is transparency.
Exactly.
And that's very clear in Article 10 of the Constitution. You have to be transparent. There has to be some sort of accountability.
Yes.
I have to know where the money is going. If I know the money is going to place X and is being collected by this and there's a statute, there's what. This is, in fact, one of the things that the judges were raising in that judgment is, we don't know even how the requirements for someone to qualify to get that house. If they're given us a full circle journey, like the entire journey,
Exactly.
This is how we are getting the land, we are putting up these structures on public land, we are turning around this public land this way legally to make it kind of like a private property where people can own land on it, or can own houses on it. One, well done. This is the authority that is going to collect the money. Well done.
Yeah.
This is the authority that is going to facilitate, pay salaries, done. After this long period of time, the houses will be completed, and this is maybe the structure of how you access one, and these are maybe the bandwidth of access. Well done. But we don't have all that. We're just saying we are collecting.
Exactly. And that's what now, that structure, because you see, for example, when a law comes into place, let's say, for example, I know you like making fun of me that I like data protection. So, for example, the Constitution provides your right to privacy. Okay. Then that is what led to the enactment of the Data Protection Act. Following the enactment of the Data Protection Act, now that act gave powers for the government to create a semi-autonomous body or a regulator called the Office of the
Data Protection Commissioner.
Yes, ODPC. So now, once the ODPC's office was created, they came up with regulations. Regulations to give a framework about showing how this data protection laws are going to be implemented. How are they going to be operationalized? That's where regulations now come into play.
Yeah.
From now, the law, now we have regulations. Now, these regulations now break down what you're talking about, the structure. How is this thing going to be administered step by step? I think also like one of the bodies that gives a very clear framework on administration of based on the mandates that it has been given, the Central Bank of Kenya,
Yes.
like for the banking system, they have the prudential guidelines. When you look at how the Central Bank of Kenya gives its regulations, you can open a bank and run a bank in full
without interference and without the law telling you, by the way, apa uligoof, unless you are actually really contravening that law.
Exactly.
Not a policy.
Not a policy,
because Central Bank of Kenya very rarely deals with policies. Yeah.
Yes, it gives you very clear regulations. It's very clear from how you open a bank, how you operationalize it, everything to the end. Okay? And that's what now we are asking. Can the same be done for other areas, like now the housing levy? These things that the new government or the current government wants to implement. Can you put proper structures, explain from A to Z, okay? This is how we are going to collect this money. This money is going to go to this body. This body is going to be investing this money in one, two,
A, B, C, D, E.
These are the type of houses that the government is going to build. The houses are going to be built in these counties because we are not even sure these houses that they want to build
are going to go up country.
Yeah.
And you remember there's a part that TSC people were saying, our teachers don't want houses. They've already built their houses for their people. Look, Ushago.
That's the thing.
Like, we don't want your houses. Keep your houses. Add a salaries. Like, do other things. And you see,
and that's where the public participation issue comes
that's where the
into
public
play.
Participation issue comes into play, because you are actually mandated by the law to effect public participation.
Yes.
When you look at, let me not go into maybe the generality of the Constitution.
Yes.
Let's go to specifics. Now, when you look at, I think it's Article 118 and Article 196, they mirror each other. One talks about Parliament, the other one talks about the county government.
Yeah.
And In fact, let me even read for you. I have that name here. Today I came prepared. I said,
With the Constitution.
This is my Constitution. Let me read for you.
Wait.
Article 118.
In the last episode niliwaambia msicheze na mawakili. Hii ndio maana wako single. Sorry, let's continue.
Unaniandika tu. Yeah. I keep writing on social media and say sometimes it's your family and friends are the reason why you're single. So, Article 118 of the Constitution. Parliament shall conduct its business in an open manner and its sittings and those committees shall be open to the public. Fine. Article 118 1B. Parliament shall facilitate public participation and involvement in the legislative and other business of Parliament and its committees. That is 118. That talks about the national parliament. Then we go to Article 196. 196, let me just confirm. Nisiwadanganye, and the way I've become passionate about this thing.
Umetuchomolea mpaka nini? Mpaka evidence.
Yes, Article 196. A county assembly shall, Article 196 1B, facilitate public participation and involvement in the legislative and other business functions of the assembly and its committees. So public participation is actually a constitutional mandate of parliament and counties and the county assembly. Now, tushamalizana hapo, mnafaa kufanya public participation. But how is this public participation supposed to be done?
Okay.
There have been several bills brought in parliament, I think, in diverse years. I think there's a 2016 one. I think there's one from either last year or 2022. Both of them have not been passed. So there's no really proper structure for public participation. But when you go and look at a lot of court judgments, they talk about how public participation should be conducted. One of the things that stands out to me, I think it's UKO, like number 7, but it's public participation should be conducted in good faith. Conducting something in good faith is, I want the best for you, you want the best for me.
Yeah.
Number 2, it has to be inclusive and intentionally inclusive. That is to say, someone from Kilimani should participate in the same way someone from Mukuru kwa Njenga is participating. And when you look at the places where these houses are going to be built, in fact, one of the principles of public participation is the people that are going to be really affected by that legislation are the ones whose kind of opinions have to matter the most. So you can't just say, we are going to tax employees, and then watoto wenye umeleta ni probably traders from Gikomba. And you're saying this thing is going to go in income first. Because one of the things that court judiciary was saying is it's discriminatory because why does it only talk about people who are employed?
Yeah.
Now, another thing that stood out to me about public participation is that the people that conduct after public participation has been conducted, that Justice Meoli was saying, you really don't have, the parliament doesn't really have to give reasons as to why they're rejecting proposals by people on public participation, which is fine.
Yeah.
But she said, it would be nice for you to tell me why you're not accepting our proposal, because all these groups have their proposals and there has to be a proper notice. You say public participation will occur on days A, B, C, D, E, at this and this public place, at this and this time, you're invited, come, or you can write your articles. Actually, it doesn't really just have to be a Barasa. It has to, it can be, you can write.
Yes.
And there has been a lot of public participation on this issue of the housing levy and social health insurance fund. And all Kenyans are saying is, tuongezeni salary, tupunguzieni taxes. But what is the government saying? Judiciary, sasa, you people are bad because you're curtailing what you're supposed to do. What judiciary is just trying to tell you is, go back and read that constitution that you swore kama umeinua hivi. Go and read it.
So you swore to
interpret it. And then come back with that policy as it's enshrined in the Constitution and Public Finance Management Act. And then we shall sort you.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense. I think I really love the passion that Mikhala has brought to this episode. I love it. It's amazing. Anyway, I think, and that's, for me, I think I keep asking myself, what happened to civic education? Yeah. Because when we were growing up, when we were kids, we used to hear about civic education. But right now, it's really not there. Because, for example, we have these new regulations, these new policies, laws that are coming in, especially like here in Kenya, where anytime there's a change in government, the new government comes with its own
52 laws.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, they come with new regulations,
Yeah.
new policies. They're like,
Yes.
yeah. You know, what happened to civic education? Because I feel like if civic education was still happening, then we would know that we actually need to be involved in public participation. We would know what are the channels that we are expected to participate when our opinion is needed. Because, you know, for example, last year when the Finance Act was coming in 2023, it was said that there is public participation. That public participation, I was online looking like, how can we give our feedback?
Views, yes.
To the government that we actually don't want a lot of these things that you want to implement, but you couldn't actually find the mechanism. And the various petitions that different individuals put out, it was like, okay, yeah, go do your petitions online. Good for you.
But people are being invited to parliament on Twitter.
Oh.
I don't know if it was for this one, for the Finance Act, or it was for SHIF, one of them. People were getting like invites like on Twitter to kind of, if they see you're too passionate, they invite you, they say come. But what do? You go with your document, and maybe, I don't know if they were presenting or they were just giving their document, and then you leave, and then they're like, okay, we rejected your proposals, we are moving on.
What?
Because that's exactly what happened with probably the finance bill. Because do you want to tell me Kenyans did not publicly participate and say, we don't want this, we want this, we want this?
No.
We didn't.
Yeah. I think that's something that we need to actually look into, see what happened and how can it come back, you know? We need civic education because people need to know what's happening. We need to understand what the government is doing, how are they spending our money? I keep saying that. Like,
how are they spending our money?
Yes, they need to be accountable. We need to know how they're spending our money every day. And we also need to know, for example, projects that started. Like, how far are they? You know? Vision 2030. What happened to Vision 2030?
Vision 2030 went with God bless his soul, Mr. Kibaki. But
we need to know what happened to those projects. Yeah, because you can't, every new government that comes in, you can't be coming
with a new policy.
Exactly.
Like you always have something different.
Yeah.
Why don't you, especially because this was a transitional government from Uhuru to Honorable Ruto or President Ruto, it should have been like carry whatever progressive projects he was doing, carry them into this term and complete them.
Yes.
Like all we need is completions
and
lower taxes.
And lower taxes, yeah. But you see, that's where the challenge of politics comes into place. It's because you see, when it comes to politics, it's about my ego. It's about me, When I was president, this is what I
enacted
did.
ABCDE.
Yeah, when I was president.
Alafu tukafanya,
So it's not an issue of, there's no continuity when it comes to government, because every new government,
they want to
remove everything that the previous government did and we start afresh. Please note that we are not advocating for a government that stays in power for 20 years.
We do not.
So that means continuity. No, that's not what we're advocating for, but we're advocating for continuity. Projects need to end. People need to be paid, I don't know if you heard about this issue of an audit that is being done on government debts.
Oh, yeah.
National and county government debts.
Yes, I've seen that in the papers.
Yes. I think, does that mean that our national government and county governments don't have proper records?
For me, it was more just the magnitude of how much people are owed in this country, a country that owes 11 trillion to I don't know, God knows who, still owes more locally.
Yes, locally.
Yes, yeah. For me, it was there were such gaping conversations.
Yes.
And when I watched even the conversations from the retreat in Naivasha the other day, where Governor Waiguru and Honorable Sakaja were talking about the issues of how counties are affected with the lack of money and money not being disbursed to them, and how they feel like the national government is hoarding funds. I was just like,
where?
Kwani tax yenye inakolektiwa inaenda wapi?
Inaenda wapi? Yeah. I know. But you see, that's where now, like the issue I was talking about, we need to see what percentage of the taxes are being used for salaries? What percentage is it being used for development projects? Because we can't have 100% of the government expenditure going to recurrent expenditure like salaries, people's cars. Like I keep seeing CSs driving in town with like a motorcade of 5 vehicles, and you're just thinking, what wastage? Because who do you think
Our
wants
money.
to kill you?
Did you see that?
Like,
Did you see that?
Like we really, we don't like you, but we are not trying to kill you. Like 1 or 2 cars
It's
is enough.
fine,
Like,
yeah. You see, people were up in arms because Mtata drives a Probox. His Probox got into an accident. I don't know if he was in it or not, but people were like, Mtata drives a Probox. I'm like, the fact that we are even shocked
that he drives a Probox
is a problem itself.
That's the thing.
It is a problem. The fact that we look at it, we're like,
yeah.
Kwani Prado yake iko? Is a problem itself.
Anyway, I don't want to get into trouble, but also, did you see the expenditure for State House?
Yes. Do you see that? They need 700 million.
Hey, yeah.
And they're asking for 400 million for what?
I think what was it for?
We want 700 million for a dais. Ile ya kusimama juu hapo, ile podium.
Where?
700 meter.
Where? Ni kama siku hizi in Kenya we don't understand what a million is. We need to go back to math class.
Because, but I think also the other thing that we underscore is the fact that the Kenyan, I usually say this, and I'll stand by this. A lot of Kenyan laws are very self-sufficient. Like you can go through the process, and I'm sure if the drafters of this housing levy thing sat down with proper technocrats that understand the housing issues of Kenya, they'd be able to draft an end-to-end process.
Yes.
Now, look at it from this perspective. We know about KIPRA, Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and Analysis. That is actually a body that is mandated by an act of parliament to carry out research every year on policy and do policy analysis. Imagine.
And they actually do very good papers.
And they do very good papers.
Yeah.
I can't remember who I was watching or listening to, and they were talking about the fact that when the issue of free education was coming into place, there was somewhat consultation with a body like KIPRA, and I can't remember if it was KIPRA or a body of like nature that actually laid down the implementation of it. Imagine if they went with this policy to KIPRA and said, KIPRA, look at this for us. Like, lay it down to party end-to-end management process, and let's maybe take it to parliament to look at it. Let's take it even to some members of the judiciary. I'm sure the president has a lot of advisors that are lawyers.
Yeah.
Let them look at it against the law, and let's make sure this is a solid policy before we roll it out.
Yeah.
So KIPRA wako hapo seated, being wasted, because what have we decided as a government? We want to be HFCK. We want to build houses. That is not the business of the government. I like what our former boss used to say when you'd say, please buy a building in Apple. They're like, I'm not in the business of leasing. I'm in the business of insurance. You are in the business of running a nation. You're not in the business of building houses. You're not in the business of overtaxing Kenyans. That's not your business. Your business is actually protecting the constitution and not even serving the Kenyan public.
Yeah.
This issue of building houses should have just been, in fact, outsourced to a body that would have done a good job of assessing everything, given us a clean paper, let us publicly participate, put it in an act of parliament, sail it through, tuipeleke paka juu, because
And if it's an issue of urban housing, and that's where now, like for me, I'm very concerned about this money that they're collecting. Okay. So they're going to collect so much money from us. And then this money, they're going to use it to build houses. Okay. So they're going to give the contracts to either some Chinese company or some Kenyan contractors. And then we're going to be told a building that costs 50 million to build costs 300 million. Or a billion.
2 billion.
Oh, yeah. 2 billion. Oh, yeah. Yeah. In Kenya, we deal with billions.
2 billion.
I'm sorry. 2 billion. So, you see, that's where now that issue is going to be a very big problem because you've deducted money from my salary. Then when I need a house,
you can't just tell me, get in here.
Exactly.
Or probably the process of getting those houses is going to be so rigorous.
Exactly.
And it's going, I remember, I can't remember we were doing this research, but there was something about the people that are getting evicted are not going to be able to afford that affordable housing. So, we umeni evict, umenitoa somewhere, uko Mukuru or wherever, from my small shack where I was enjoying life with my Form 1 child. And then now you've built a high-rise building. Mi nilikuwa nalipa 3,000 in my shack. I was not complaining, in fact. Mi nilikuwa nataka tu upunguze bei ya unga.
Yes.
But you've built a high-rise. I cannot afford to even get that property either on mortgage or on rent. Yeah.
And that's a very big problem, okay? So I think basically what we are seeing on this episode is, one, we need public participation. Public participation needs to come back properly. As it is right now,
it's not public participation. It's exactly. I come, read a document at you, and then you sign somewhere, we publicly participated, and you go.
Yeah, and I don't know if you heard or you saw in the news that the MPs who are under the umbrella of the ruling party were told to support every bill or every
legislation that comes into parliament.
Yes,
we need to have that conversation outside this channel because we'll get each other in trouble.
Okay. Anyway, so
let me just stop you there before our channel is censored.
Thank you. Fire. Anyway, we shall wait for Kalonzo to speak on our behalf.
And Halwale. Please, Halwale, do something. Ferdinand Barasa.
So the main thing is public participation, legal framework. We need to have, so public policy, as we've mentioned, it encompasses the legal framework and the regulations that govern how various sectors work in the economy or in the country. Okay, so we need to have clear legal framework for various implementations that are being done by the government. If there's no clear legal framework,
judiciary watawarudisha.
Exactly.
Let me help Ndanu. Judiciary watawarudisha. And let me tell you, the only institution that is working in this country now is the judiciary. Quote me. We are working.
See, I thought we are stopping each other from getting into trouble.
Sorry. Every institution in this country is working. The judiciary is working harder.
Please. Don't get into trouble. Yeah. All right. Thanks. So I think we've had a very passionate conversation today about economic policy and the law. And I think I really enjoyed this. And it would be important as Kenyans to talk, to publicly air our views to the government. Let them know that we know what are the proper ways in which they're supposed to do things.
And we expect that you follow. Imagine we elected you because we expect that you know and you would follow these rules.
Yes.
And we are entitled to legitimately expect you to follow this thing.
Yeah. Yes. So it's as simple as that. Thank you for watching and listening to today's conversation. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Put a like, comment. Let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover, any questions that you have on anything related to legal matters, regulatory issues, economic issues, or any corporate issues. Yes. So this is a channel where it's basically about information, getting information out to you, learning together, and growing together. Yes.
And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Stan, have we gotten a bit too passionate?